You're listening to DruidCast episode 202.
Driving home at night in the company of a storm. Endless tail lights, I'm sitting here alone. Another day gone by, where do they all go? It's getting harder to justify a life on death row. I wanna go where I can heal my soul, talk to the wisest people I know. I will go. Soothing sound of forest leaves, and all my troubles start to ease. Forgive me, please. You will find me under the When we are born, we are told you're part of a great machine, no chance of parole. But life is a miracle, this I know so well. It's time to turn the key of my prison cell. I wanna go where I can heal my soul, talk to the wisest people I know. I will go. The soothing sound of forest leaves, and all my troubles start to ease. Forgive me, please. You will find me under the trees. And I know that it's true, it's so much harder to do than to say. All that I can say to you is come and meet me there too. You know the way. I wanna go where I can heal my soul, talk to the wisest people I know. I will go. The soothing sound of forest leaves, and all my troubles start to ease. Forgive me, please. I wanna go where I can heal my soul, talk to the wisest people I know. I will go. The soothing sound of forest leaves, and all my troubles start to ease. If you agree, come and join me under the trees.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to DruidCast episode 202. I am your host, Dave the Bard, and DruidCast is brought to you on or around the 20th of the month by the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids. If you want to find out more about the Order and our courses, you can do that at our website, which is at druidry.org. Opening the show, you heard a re-recorded version of my song Under the Trees, taken from my new album, Raise the Flag of Green, that is coming out on the 10th of May. I am so excited for you to hear the new songs, my friends. My last album of songs was Sabbath, which was released way back in 2015. So this one is very, very special. And you can find out more about the album on my website, which is at paganmusic.co.uk. Well, on with the show. This month's Talky Bit is an interview with Donna O'Driscoll, author and Grand Archdruid of the Ancient Order of Druids in America, about her new book, Land Healing, Physical, Metaphysical and Ritual Approaches to Healing the Earth. It's a fabulous book, thoroughly recommended, and this is a fabulous interview. So, grab that cuppa and enjoy this month's Talky Bit.
The Talky Bit.
So I am here with Donna O'Driscoll. Again, welcome back to the show, Donna. Good to see you and good to hear you.
See you too.
Yeah. It's been a while since you've been on DruidCast, and I think it would be good for any new listeners to just catch up on who you are and what you've been doing. So tell people a bit about Donna O'Driscoll.
Sure. So I've been a Druid almost 20 years. I'm in Western Pennsylvania, living in the Laurel Highlands. So I'm a mountain Druid, and I would consider myself an animist bioregional Druid. So I really focus on working with the plants and the mountains and the rivers and that sort of, rather than larger forms of divinity. I really root myself in my local ecosystem. I do currently serve as the Grand Archdruid in the Ancient Order of Druids in America, and I've been in leadership in that order since 2013, and the Grand Archdruid since 2019. And I've also been one of Obad's Mount Haemus scholars, working on the Bardic arts, and doing some research on how people turn themselves into bards and the joy of that. And I'm also involved in one of our big Druid gatherings here in the East Coast, the Magus gathering, which we actually have coming up in a couple of weeks, working on our initiations and rituals and all of those things. And I'm an artist, love painting and doing a lot of Druid-themed art, and really embracing the experience of the flow of Awen, and practice herbalism and permaculture. I have a 5-acre homestead. Just got done taking care of my animals for an hour before we're talking.
Yeah.
In the morning.
Because it's early there, right? What time?
Yeah. It's 8 a.m. here.
8 a.m. Now, you answered an email I sent you. It must have been about 5 a.m. in the morning, wasn't it?
Yeah, I was getting up to take care of the homestead before I came on.
You're a better Druid than me. See, I think I should have been a Wiccan, because I do evenings and nights better than I do dawn.
Well, when you have a homestead, we have about 30 birds, different kinds, like chickens, geese, all of that. They don't wait for anybody. When the sun comes up, they want out. So I'm usually up a little bit before the sun.
I like the morning, but that's still the middle of the night as far as I'm concerned. So I'm always intrigued. Can you tell us a bit of how you found Druidry, of what led you to the path in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, this actually sort of ties with our topic for today. I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, and Western Pennsylvania is this incredibly beautiful place. We're in the Appalachian Mountains. My specific range is the Alleghenies, and always felt from a really young age really connected with nature. And my grandfather would take me into the woods, and we would hunt mushrooms, and he would teach me about the trees and the plants and so on. But also at the same time, I sort of live in this very extractive area. So, we have, right now we have conventional fracking wells, we have mountaintop removal. I spent a great deal of time, growing up near streams that were so polluted that nothing grew, because that was from acid mine, like the mines, the old coal mines just keep producing pollution. We have logging, and I had sort of this experience where this forest that I grew up in was logged when I was 14. And I just sort of almost like refused to go back into the forest because it was so sad for me. And then in my early 20s, after like 7 or 8 years, I went back in the forest finally after this logging, and there was the forest regrowing, and there was the healing reishi mushrooms everywhere. And just really, I think like it was that and a series of other sort of events that led me to realize like, wow, nature is so powerful and so healing, and really the only spiritual connection I seem to have is with the living earth. So I searched around a bit, and one of my friends is like, well, Dana, you sound like a druid. And after that I found both obot and aoda, and I joined both of the orders, and it's I've kind of been doing that ever since.
Right. You know, you've mentioned you're an animist as far as your
Yeah.
Druid is concerned. I've noticed a huge rise in the amount of not just druids, but people who describe themselves as animists right
Mhm.
now. And I have this sneaky feeling that like an animistic worldview could actually dig us out of the hole that we're in. You know, the
Really.
idea that other life forms and rocks and stones and mountains and rivers have agency in their own spirit to connect with, to develop relationships with.
Mhm.
And so what was it? Was there any kind of peak experience or something that gave you that connection of animism, of
Yeah.
understanding that, you know, other things have, you know, other beings are persons, I think, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so this goes back to being a kid, and spending time in the woods where I had friends that were trees, friends that were rivers. I think that to some extent, all children can hear the voices of nature, like the idea of the imaginary friend, like we laugh at it, as adults. But, I remember I had this really wonderful tree that I was friends with, had all these interesting roots. Was near kind of on a floodplain, so when the creek would rise, the kind of would erode the roots, and there was just this and then that was when I was a child, and then after this logging happened and I went back into the woods and I found this friend that had been cut down, and there, though, the stump had so much life. The stump had these reishi mushrooms growing out. Stump was covered in moss and there was bugs, and the stump was like, hello. And I was like, hi, you're still here. Like, you were cut down. I wouldn't expect you to be here. And the spirit of this as an Eastern hemlock was like, actually, I'm still here. I've been waiting for you. And I think that there is definitely a rise in animism, as you said, and I do really think that a lot of people are having these experiences. I think that nature, the spirits of nature, are really reaching out and saying, hey, humans, wake up. Here we are. Let's reconnect, and let's rebuild these sacred relationships that are older than time, that are older than recorded human history. And it's, to me, it blows my mind. I do a lot of practice in the permaculture community, which is sort of an ecologically oriented design system, thinking about how do you design a garden in a way that honors nature and that aligns with natural processes. So, we don't till the land, you use sheet mulch, you mimic the forest floor. And, these are people that meet a lot of people that have no spiritual practices or consider themselves atheists. And yet when they talk about the soil, when they talk about their interaction with plants, it's like, well, you think you're an atheist, but you're kind of moving towards animism. And
Mm.
it's so exciting to be like even outside of the spiritual community and see how many people are saying, wow, I really feel like that tree is talking to me. Or, wow, I feel like when I sit on this stone, I'm gaining wisdom. Or when I get my hands in the soil, the soil speaks. And it's sort of this phenomenon that's happening. And, as I've been an animist, most pretty much almost all my adult life. And I would say I've probably always been an animist. And it's really exciting to see how many people are starting to listen and, create space for that in their lives. Because it does really completely change your orientation, which I'm sure we can talk a little bit more about.
Yeah. I mean, it really does, and it's always felt to me that Druidry is about relationship. It's
Mhm.
not about power over. It's never to me been about spell crafting and stuff like that, or all about me essentially and what I can get from life. It's all about how I fit in and am part of something bigger than myself. And I think we've I was I can say that I was sold this idea, and I think many people were sold this idea that humans are separate from nature. It's like it now makes me smile a little bit when I see David Attenborough programs on the telly, and it's all about the natural world, and they don't show one human in it, as if somehow we are not part of that natural world. But of course we are. And I think that, Druidry for me, animism, it woke me up to the fact that what I do as a human is no different really to the ant who builds an ant nest.
Yeah.
The ant nests are doing things like ants do, and we do things that humans do. It's just that we do it because there's so many of us, and we do it on such a large scale of dominion over things that the relationship has started to go out the window. And I think that the Druidry kind of wakes you up that actually, you are in relationship with everything around you. And, that's a really good place to start coming from, I think, now with climate change and things like that.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I think to me, like the connection and the relationship, like it seems so simple when you start when you start down a Druid path, like, oh, I'm gonna go in the woods, I'm gonna do ritual, I'm gonna be healed by nature. And then you start really digging into it. Oh, what is my ancestral legacy here on this land? Or what, well, should I just pick those tomatoes without asking permission? And as soon as you start getting into like this deeper idea of like, well, what does it mean to have a relationship with another human being? So how would I translate that? Like, I don't come up to a random person on the street and start like pulling on their hair and grabbing their purse, right? In the same way that maybe if I come up to a random tree in the woods, I shouldn't just plop myself down and, saw off a branch, right? And as soon as you start thinking about like relationship building in that way, and the idea that nature has sovereignty and that the spirits of nature have something to say and teach us, then it gets really kind of complicated. Like life becomes more complicated as a Druid and as an animist, but in such a fun way, right? So then what is my relationship to all of these other beings that exist in the sense that I am constantly interacting with them? So how do I engage in, reciprocation? How do I engage in respect? And eventually, how do I transmute these sort of, as you mentioned, the word dominion, like these sort of very narcissistic, dominion-oriented mindsets that I grew up with that I maybe never questioned, and now I am. And I think the more that we're able to sort of do that work on a daily basis, not just when we're doing ceremony, but sort of living as an animist every day and saying, how am I? Like a good example, I was just writing about this on my blog. I save the earthworms. Like I work on a campus, and whenever it rains, we always have these giant sidewalks and the earthworms are crawling across. And I always take the time to move the earthworms gently off the sidewalk and say, be happy you met a Druid today, hi friend, and it's something so small, but to me and that earthworm are the same. There's no difference. The worm is living their best life. I'm living mine. And in this case, I don't want the earthworm to get dried up or stepped on, so I move them.
Yeah.
And I know it's silly, it's small, but it's not, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's not a small thing for that earthworm, that's for sure.
No.
No. So, I mean, I think you probably answered this already, but let's get to your book. You have written a new book, Land Healing, Physical and Ritual Practices for Healing the Earth. So I've kind of got a feeling why you would want to write a book like that already from what you've been saying, but maybe, fill in some gaps for me. What led you to write the book in the first place?
Yeah, so I really consider, you think about where we are right now as human beings, right? We've got the sixth mass extinction happening, which is never in the news. Last year here across the United States in the East Coast, we had our skies literally darken with smoke for 3 weeks. I mean, it was just we're seeing these tremendous changes happening, and we're seeing them happening at sort of a faster scale, maybe, where I think, maybe 10 or 15 years ago, you could sort of say, oh, well, that's a far away problem. But today, I don't think it is. And, in my role in AODA and, just in being in the Druid community, so many people are coming into nature spirituality with sort of what I call the Druid's paradox, right? On one hand, we see nature as this incredibly sacred thing that is healing and wonderful. But on the other hand, we live these lives that are really not geared towards nature at all. And really, both all of my work, all of my books really focus on that paradox. And in the case of land healing, what I discovered over time in doing my permaculture design certificate, studying herbalism, studying natural building and bushcraft, and all of these different sort of, ways of reconnecting physically, is that there are these tremendous amount of tools that we have that aren't necessarily easily accessible and in the hands of people. And we also have these narratives, these big narratives going on culturally that say you can't make a difference, you can't do anything. We leave it up to G8, we leave it up to climate talks, we leave it up to the Paris Agreement, all of these things. And so we sit here in this really powerless way. But the truth is that there's a great deal we can do. And really the book is exploring that. And for me personally, I live in this, as I said earlier, I live in this landscape that is so beautiful and also so damaged and so tragic. And how many mountaintops do I need to see removed before I personally say, well, what can I do? Or how many forests need to be logged? And every day I have people that are writing to me on my blog or, through AODA or, in my community saying, wow, this is happening. How do I do something about it? And so as soon as you open yourself up to the spirits of nature, you open yourself up to Druidry or to any kind of nature-based spiritual practice or paganism, you end up in the paradox at some point. And so what I really wanted to do is I wanted to create a set of really accessible tools that people could use that would allow them to be a force of good. Because this other narrative that we have is that humans are bad and that we can't do anything but, pick up the garbage and get out of the forest. This idea that we are, and that is a very strong narrative. And I mean, humans have caused a lot of problems. I'm not going to sit here and disagree. Especially humans in Western cultures, right? Like, that the paradigm and the worldview are flawed and problematic, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that individuals are bad, right? In fact, we as humans can be a tremendous force of good. So if we take sort of spirituality and nature spirituality and combine that with techniques like permaculture, suddenly we have, and ceremony, right? And thinking about working in the metaphysical and the physical, suddenly we have this capacity to do great good. And if enough of us start doing it, wow, we can change the world. So, I mean, I wrote the book because I'm hoping people will pick this work up all over the world. And suddenly we're changing the world and we're changing the paradigm. So I might have kind of like big aspirations in my mind, but I really think that it's just a matter of empowering people and putting tools in their hands and sort of saying, well, how can we build out this piece of a spiritual tradition to really allow us to feel like we are giving back, that we are reciprocating, and that we are learning how to be humans embedded in nature again, embedded in our ecosystem in a positive way.
Yeah. It can feel overwhelming, I think, to a lot of people, and a lot of listeners to the show will probably agree that when you look at the news and you see what is happening to the environment around the world, it sometimes feels like, there I am washing out my Marmite jar for recycling, and you're just thinking, how is this possibly doing any good with the scale of the change that needs to take place? But I think it's that sphere of influence thing, isn't it? It's if you concentrate on things that are essentially at the moment maybe outside your sphere of influence, you will feel overwhelmed and you'll feel like you're powerless. But there are a lot of things that we can do on a daily basis that are within our sphere of influence. And a lot of that works in our own little square few miles of where we live. And that's what I've got from your book, which I read, and it's a fabulous book. And it's beautifully constructed as well. The flow of the text that takes you through, the different things you can do. And I think that there's also this idea that, there's a cynicism that may be creeping in of the idea of earth healing, of thoughts and prayers, these things that, essentially feel like people are just sitting down thinking about stuff. And I think that but what your book is suggesting is a combination of both. And the thinking about stuff is what develops the relationship. I think it's that mountain that's being mined is a person. And if you view it as a person, it's much harder to blow it up, and so
Yeah.
the kind of shift of mindset is really important, but also developing a relationship. Go to that mountain, sit there, communicate with it, and also, write to your local, well, MP here or whatever, and do all of the other practical stuff as well. But keep it local, because if everybody kept it local, you would eventually cover the entire country and the entire world, wouldn't you? That's the thing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So wow, so much to say.
Right, yes. Yeah. You could just
Yeah, I mean,
the next 5 minutes.
so I want to speak about this idea of combining the inner and outer, right? So, I mean, this goes the whole way back to ancient Hermeticism, right? As above, so below, as within, so without, and really thinking about the synthesis of the physical and the metaphysical worlds. And this is sort of what I learned in doing these practices over all this time as both a Druid and a permaculture practitioner, right? Is like, the more that we're able to do things on both levels, and it might just be a simple thing like I'm writing my representative, I'm speaking out on this issue, or it might be I'm going to convert my lawn, that is a very consumptive space, into a sanctuary for bees and butterflies, or into a refugia, right? A refuge for life. And if I can do that, but also nourish the earth with ceremonies, nourish the earth and heal the earth, and sort of think about how we synthesize those things, that's great. And there are also times where, like there's actually there's a new mountaintop that's being removed about 6 miles from my house. I don't have any capacity to do any physical healing on that mountain right now. Now, at some point, they're going to be done mining, probably in about 15 years. And at that point, I will go out there and I'll scatter my seed balls and I'll work on, doing anything I can to help that mountain. But for now, ceremony is the only thing that I actually have an opportunity to do. So I am going to go, as you said, the basic practice in the book starts with deep listening. It starts with animism. It says, okay, does the mountain want my help? Maybe the mountain doesn't, right? So I'm going to go as close as I can to the mountain and say, hey, I'm here. I'm witnessing what's happening. I'm present. What do you need from me? And if the mountain says, go away, human, then I go away, because I'm at least respecting the sovereignty of that mountain, right? But maybe the mountain's like, please help me. So then the question is, well, how do I help? And the book sort of gets into sort of the nuances of that. I may not want to inject a huge amount of ritual energy into that mountain when that mountain is actively suffering. So, there's sort of different techniques to think about how we might address different places, moving from anywhere where we can do physical healing, we can do rewilding, seed scattering, sort of on our broader landscape, to various kinds of ceremonies and ritual practices. And sort of, to me, and being a good human, teaching others, right? Being an ambassador for the land. So to me, it's a combination of these approaches that each of us can take up. And each of us has different abilities. Each of us has different life circumstances. People who live in a city have a really different life than, say, me on 5 acres, where I'm able to really do a lot of healing work really intensively here. But when I lived in a small town and I didn't have any land, I was out in the wilds a lot, right? And I was doing ceremonies. So I do think it's sort of it's sort of a choose your own adventure, so to speak, where there's a lot of different options for people who live in different circumstances. But the idea is how do we become that force of good? How do we become a good ancestor? How do we leave a legacy for future generations of not just human people, but all persons who live on this land? How do we change that narrative? And so that's really what the book kind of gets into and provides as many tools as possible to do.
Yeah. The kind of general idea is that we would go out into wilderness. And I remember in your book, you said that something very interesting is that the idea of going out and collecting the rubbish and then getting out, and that's it, and leave it, and then leaving nature to itself. But to a lot of First Nations peoples, that is not wilderness. That's not good, and that actually you still have to develop a relationship and an ongoing relationship with what we would call the wilderness, and not necessarily get out, but continue to develop that relationship with that space. And that's fine I can understand that for places like woodlands and mountains and things like that. But what about if you are an urban person, and what are the things that you might be able to do in an urban situation of land healing?
Yeah, absolutely. So, whenever we think about urban environments, we do think about how do we bring nature back, and how do we honor and acknowledge the nature that's there. So there's a couple of techniques I talk about. One of the places I talk about is offering land healing and regeneration for places nobody is interested in. So in urban environments, we always have these little pockets of, like, down by the railroad tracks, under the bridge. There's these little patches of life growing, but no one's paying attention. And I, like, I was recently just in Providence, and I was walking, in between where I was staying and my friend's house, and there's this whole patch of trees just covered in garbage. I went in there, picked up some garbage, did a little ceremony for the trees, and it was like nobody had paid attention to these trees for who knows how long, right? So
Mm.
so part of this is like, how am I in relationship with whatever nature is where I exist? And maybe how do I cultivate? Maybe I join a community garden, an urban farm. Maybe I develop a patio garden on my back patio. So how can I do these various things? But it amazes me when I go into cities to see, and I'm not a city dweller now, I have lived in them in the past, but it amazes me to see the richness of life that is present even among people. And so how are you then an advocate for that life? How do you connect with that life? How do you maybe offer something new and something different? How do you do a ceremony for the trees that are literally along that highway that nobody pays any attention to, because they're living beings too? And maybe they're not living in the best circumstance when they're literally along the highway, but they can still use your healing and your love. And that's a lot of what this comes down to, is sort of how do we sort of bring back this idea of being caretakers and guardians. So Tyson Yunkaporta talks about this a lot in Sand Talk, which is like one of my favorite books. And I'd say it's definitely one that has really, that and Braiding Sweetgrass have really, by Robin Wall Kimmerer, have really heavily influenced the way that I think about the world and my relationship. And I'm so happy that we have these Indigenous teachers that are willing to write books and share their knowledge. And Tyson Yunkaporta talks about it as, humans were originally caretakers. Like, that is he says, according to the Aboriginal Australians, every being on the whole earth has a role and a responsibility. And for humans, that is us as a caretaker. So regardless of whether you're in a city or you're in a suburban environment or you're in a rural environment, there is land there. All land is sacred. And how do you become a caretaker for that land? For people in cities, it's the same as anywhere else. Go out, walk your city, see what you see, observe the dandelions coming up in the cracks of the sidewalks, observe the migratory birds that might be coming through. How can you help? How can you do ceremonies for abundance and blessing? How can you, maybe you can take that little patch of wild space and add some flowers and some native seeds. So there's sort of like, I think that, we are all on this earth, and, regardless of how much human dominance we have, there's still opportunities to heal.
Yeah. There's maybe it's that word sacred that is something to think about, because certainly when I first found Druidry and paganism, sacred sites were stone circles, were, long barrows, were hill forts, monuments left by people from millennia ago who you consider to be pagan ancestors. And maybe a sacred site could be a grove of yew trees, a special one. But I think actually that's something that could really do with shifting a little bit. And you said all land is sacred.
Yes.
And it's hard, I think, when you're in a town to walk around and think this is sacred land. But even down my road, there's trees growing, and I can notice the different parts of the trees that are growing in different seasons, and maybe develop a relationship with those trees. And if they are under threat, I can make sure that they aren't destroyed. And the same with the local park. I live right by a harbour, and it's a working harbour. There is bits of paper and plastic and dropped into that water all the time. Yet within it, it's a thriving ecosystem as well. And so just going down there every now and again with a bin bag and picking up the rubbish, but then not legging it, not going, well, I've done my bit now, I've got to get away. Just keep on noticing what grows there and what I mean, there's a bank that has so many wild herbs and flowers. I could probably spend a lifetime identifying them all and just learning what they do and how they grow and things like that. And I think that is probably the kind of idea of seeing other land as sacred rather than just these recognized sacred sites that we've been growing up with all our pagan lives. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, my question is, when's the last time that harbor had a ceremony? When's the last
Oh,
time
good day,
anybody?
actually.
Maybe you give up that harbor a ceremony every day, right? But think about that, like, this idea, like that, we think about our ancestors. So we go back to the stone circles, right? We go back to all these things. Our ancestors did regular ceremonies for the earth that nourished the earth, that provided it in the same way that the rain nourishes the earth and the sunlight nourishes the earth. Humans, in their original role as caretakers, were nourishing the earth. And we have so many examples of these ceremonies. I mean, wassailing is a great example, right? Also coming out of our own ancestral legacy. But a lot of the places in the world no longer have that nourishment. Those ceremonies are gone. So, even if you can't do anything physically, you can still honor the land that is there. I think about, sometimes I go into buildings and I just sort of connect with the earth under that building, say, hi, I'm here. I acknowledge that you existed. I acknowledge there used to be lots of things growing there, and maybe someday there will be again. Do you need anything from me? And so I do think that this really, a lot of what I'm talking about is this, and we're talking about is this reorientation to say everything, and this gets back to animism, everything is of the earth. So I have a jar of water, right? This glass jar came from the earth. So this jar is sacred, right? Because this is of the earth. I am of the earth. Everything is of the earth. And as soon as you start with that sort of mindset that everything is sacred because everything is of the earth, and we know nature is good, right? It's the one thing all Druids agree on. Nature is good. And this jar came from the earth. That land is still there under that post office. That harbor, even though it has a lot of human use, is a sacred place. And what can I do to nourish that place? What can I do to heal that place? How can I give that place a bit of care that probably hasn't had any care? Because this other piece of this is that, we think about the last couple of centuries and the ways that the land has been treated. We have a lot of work to do. There's a tremendous amount of work to do. There's just, to me, I go out and everywhere I go, regardless if I'm traveling in my own area or if I leave, it's just like, the amount, once you start doing this work, you'll find regardless of where you go, oh, you're here. Can you do a ceremony? Oh, you're here, leaving. I make, and I talk about this in the book, I make these little sigils. And I usually do them on like stones or little pieces of wood. And then I infuse them with blessings. So even if I'm walking down the street of the city, I see a tree and I'm like, oh, tree, I'd love to give you a blessing. Here's my sigil. And I just stick it into the roots, So there's so many ways in which we can just sort of acknowledge the fact that the land is sacred and alive, that we live in this enchanted, beautiful land. And that's sort of, and that's another piece that's right. This idea of re-enchantment. How do we bring ourselves? Listen, the land is sacred. The land is enchanted. The land is full of spirit. It's just that humans no longer see it. So, in taking up this work of being a land healer and taking up this work of simply just being present, right? And acknowledging these things, then we can start to see the sacredness and we can start to believe it. And then hopefully we can teach younger generations to believe it and, and teach others to believe it. And suddenly, not only do we as Druids believe it's sacred, but now other people do. And now everyone is saying, oh, wow, okay, let's treat this land differently.
Yeah, those two books that you mentioned, Brave Sweetgrass and part of the other one.
Sand Talk.
That's it, Sand Talk. Yeah, I read both of those myself. And it is a different way of looking at life, without a doubt. And a much more, I mean, if you, like you say, if you strip everything away, I think human beings are essentially, that's what we are. We are animists. We have that relationship. And I remember when I came to Druidry, I was looking between, Wicca, Druidry, witchcraft. And I think it was the relationship with the land itself, with the lands that you can see and the lands you can't see, the other world as well as the physical worlds and things like that. That's what really drew me to Druidry. And then I thought, well, I needed something else. So I looked at bushcraft and wilderness awareness to kind of, and to me, that was completing the circle. So I could tell you all of the magical things about a hawthorn tree, but then I could also tell you how a hawthorn tree grows, where it grows, what the berries, what happens, and the relationship, the physical relationship with those plants. I did a course from the Wilderness Awareness School called a Kamana course, where they basically have a thing called a sit spot, which reminded me very much of a sacred grove and the way that the sacred grove is taught within Druidry. But from what I can tell as well from what you're saying is that we probably need to listen as much as we talk, if not more. We need to listen more than we talk. And I was wondering whether or not you had any, well, I know there is in the book because I've read it, but any skills or techniques that people could practically use. I think you mentioned one of them just now, but for doing that, for being able to slow down and listen, because that's what it's about really, isn't it? It's just letting the stuff that we do on a day-to-day basis fall away so that there is just us and this other being, be it a tree or a hill or a mountain or a river or whatever. But still, you need to know how to communicate. So what tips would you give for that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the challenges we have now is that our attention is, everything is competing for our attention. The notifications on the phone itself, all the screens, all, you go into a doctor's office, there's constant, and we have this like really constant inputs from our culture that are just so intense, right? And I get this question a lot. I get this question a lot from new druids. They're like, oh, I can't even meditate. I can't even sit. But sit spot, John Young's six spot is a fabulous technique, where you just take, even if it's just 5 or 10 minutes, and even if you can't do it every day, just commit to once a week where you go and you sit quietly and you observe nature and you interact. Yeah. And maybe you just sit or taking the moment to like observe a flower close up for 5 minutes. And just use your human skills, use your 5 senses, and then use your intuition, located in your gut, right? Located in your solar plexus to really just sense these beings. So a lot of it is slowing down. The other advice I have that works really well for people is to find a way to build these practices into your day. So in the same way you want to do a regular spiritual practice, how do you do it? Well, we started this conversation by saying that I go out on my farm every day and take care of my birds. Since that is something I have to do every single day without fail, I'm outside every day. So why don't I just take an extra 15 minutes? This is what I do. Outside, I do my sphere of protection, I do my light body exercise, and then I take a walk on the land. I find somewhere to sit for 5 or 10 minutes. Even if I have to go to work, I get up early, make the commitment, just check in with the land. How are things going? Anybody need anything? Maybe I see this morning I saw a beautiful heron fly overhead, a great blue heron, who's just, we had that connection for a moment. So I really think that finding ways to slow down, making a commitment to time, and I would say start small. You can stop doom scrolling on your phone for 10 minutes and instead put it down, leave it in your house, better yet, and go outside and just experience nature. Another practice that I recommend for people is to integrate nature connection with bardic arts in some way. So, for you, Dave, maybe you'll go out and you'll sit by your harbor or by your trees with your guitar, right? And just take some time to say, what is this interaction we're having? For me, I do a lot of botanical illustration and painting. So I might just take my paints out into the woods or my sketchbook and 10 times sketching a mushroom and slowing down, because as I'm sketching that mushroom and I are already in relationship. We're already having a conversation, and it's just a matter of giving the space and time. And that's, I think, what really blows people away is as soon as you create the space for these things, like these are human skills that we all have, that we all can cultivate. And this is really part of our human birthright. We have been talking to spirits. We have been connecting with nature. We have been, interacting in our world for so long. And just because modern life doesn't allow for that, like that is in our DNA, that is in our bones. And every single person has the capacity to build that kind of relationship. And it's just a matter of how do I find one that works for me, that I can build into my life, that I can, that can be a regular part. Just like anything else, you practice it, you get good at it. I
Mm.
could not talk to trees the first time I sat down to try, but I could talk to any tree just like I can talk to you now. Why? I created space, I practiced it, and now it works. And
Yeah.
so I think that, a lot of times all that's stopping us is either saying we can't do it or we don't have space for it. But finding space is really important. And that gets into this idea I talk about in the book, like this deep listening practice and what it's all about.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, ritual, your book is, there are a lot of rituals in the book, but they're not complicated. They're not kind of, Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn style, Abramelin rituals. They're basic rituals of communication. Um, and I thought that some of those were absolutely beautiful. But what do you think it is about ritual that that encourages that change of communication, that opens those doorways? What is it about ritual?
I mean, if we think about even the basic definitions of ritual, right? What it does, one thing it does is it gives us a regular practice. Another thing it does is it sets us apart from the everyday mundane world. And again, we think about how long have humans been doing rituals? How long have we been doing some kind of ceremony? And like here, at least where I live in the US, there are practically no rituals that exist in our culture. And so people are almost just in the same way the land is starved for ritual. I think people are starved for ritual, and the ability of just bringing people together, and how sometimes rituals spontaneously happen when people are in a space for them. I think about I have a group of women that meet once a month, and we're building a stone circle, an astrological stone circle. And we went down there. We had no plan. And it was one of the most beautiful experiences any of us had. We had a drum. All of us started chanting and dancing, and nobody planned it. It just sort of happened. And it was just this wonderful experience. And I think so. Again, it's this idea of creating space, and recognizing that the rituals nourish us and the rituals nourish the earth. But I
Mm.
do think that, like, the idea, we hear the word ritual, it's often like ritual with a capital R, right? This idea that I have to have a script, it has to be super formal. And listen, there is definitely a place for that. If I have 60 people at a Druid gathering, like we're having a couple of weeks at Magus, we probably want a good plan for that, right? But for a lot of the kinds of rituals and ceremonies that I talk about in the book, one is that they're often quiet because there's often a lot of people around. So it's like, I'm not going to go out there in my white robes with my sickle and, start proclaiming, honoring the sun, right? Like, I'm not going to do that in the middle of a city park anyways.
Mm.
Might do that in the woods of my own. So one thing is sort of like, how do we do ceremonies for the land when there's a lot of other people around? And that makes it very quiet and very different. But the other thing is that, I think that we sometimes have a tendency to overcomplicate things. Um, and I really wanted to keep it for the land healing rituals in particular. They don't have to be complicated. They do have to be rooted in sound magical practice, right? There are things you always want to protect yourself. Especially, you're going to go work the energies of a mountain that's, having the top of it removed. I don't want to mess with the energies of that without protection. But you don't necessarily have to make it complicated. I use a lot of like OM and chanting, simple energy work, and really because I've been doing this land healing, for 20 years, and you don't really need much else. It doesn't have to be complicated. The
Mm.
most important thing is that you are there and you are honoring nature. You're building that connection, and there's lots of ways to do that are good. And so I think this idea of these really complicated rituals and ceremonies, that sometimes can put people off.
Mm.
The other thing I'll say about this is that, especially, and I know this is true of a lot of Druid orders, is that we sort of have a really interesting thing that's happened during the pandemic and past, where there's a younger generation of people coming into our traditions. And they're not necessarily interested in the big stuffy rituals, these big scripts. They want to go out in the woods and have a meaningful experience. And so I think the other reason I wrote some of the book the way I did was I really wanted to make it accessible to people that, to these younger generations that, they're not interested in the Golden Dawn style stuffy ritual in a lodge. And, that's totally cool. Like, let's give them something they can do. Oh, I want to go out. The tree across my yard is being cut down. It's on a busy street. What can I do?
Mm.
All right. Well, I have 5 things in the book you can do for that exact circumstance,
Yeah.
or more, right?
Yeah. You've given a few examples, but I wondered if there was maybe one very powerful example in your past where you did your land healing for a particular event or something that was happening in your locality.
Yeah.
Is there one of those you could describe for people?
Yeah, I'll describe one. So I've been talking about our Magus Druid gathering, and actually the reason I decided to, I was sort of in the middle of writing this book, but I kind of have about 3 or 4 books going on at once, and I've sort of all these different ideas. And the reason I decided to go ahead and write this and finish this book when I did was because of what happened. So at the time this was about 7 years ago. We were actually at a different location, and where we went and did the group of us that were helping lead this gathering went and did a walkthrough. And I noticed, because I study ecology and I'm an herbalist, I noticed that the eastern hemlock trees, were full of this little bug called a woolly adelgid. And this woolly adelgid is actually destroying the hemlock populations all across the East Coast. And I said to the owner of the land, "Hey, did you know your hemlocks have woolly adelgid?" And he's like, "No, we don't have woolly adelgid." I'm like, "No, like I'm going to point it out to you." And I did. And then, we were talking about, oh, we really needed one more ritual for this ceremony. And I said, "Hey, I'd really like to see if we can do a land healing ceremony." And I was like, "Okay, cool." So long story short, we ended up doing this crazy ceremony we called a Celtic Galder. So the Norse folks have all these really interesting chanting rituals where they use runes and they chant. And it could be anything from like blessing your pancakes. So we were like, well, what if we could use the Ogham and create a healing ceremony for the hemlocks? So myself and Kat, another member of our community, we actually went and we sat with the hemlocks. We spoke with them, like, "What do you need?" The hemlocks are like, "All we want you to do is give us healing energy. We're going to decide what to do with it." So we were like, do the hemlocks want to fight? Do they want to peacefully die? Because they are, I mean, the situation there was bad, right? So we ended up getting 60 druids to basically do these concentric, beautiful circles around this hemlock, chanting Ogham and raising all of this energy in. And it was just, the ritual wasn't long. We each of the different groups, this is sort of the model we've been using for a while. Each of the different groups went off, did their own work. So we had 4 different groups, and each of the groups had their own piece of the ritual. We all came together, we raised the energy, we brought it into the hemlocks, and then sunk it into the soil. And it was just so powerful. And what was so cool about this particular ritual is that we had 60 people. Every person was a ritualist. Every person raised the energy. Every person had their own experience. It was just beautiful. And after that, it was crazy, because actually this is so funny talking to you, because as we were driving away, I put Pagan Ways on, and I was listening to Pagan Ways driving back to my house, and I was watching the mountains just glow with energy. Like, we had done such beautiful work. And I actually talk about this ritual in the book. And I just remember listening to Pagan Ways and watching every hemlock glow all across the land because we had essentially done wassail, right? We had basically selected one small group of hemlocks, and from those hemlock, we radiated that out to the entire land, and it just went. It was just this, and people were having all of after the gathering, people had so many interesting experiences with the hemlocks, with healing trees. It was just this really magical thing. And that experience that was sort of like the first large scale land healing that I had been a part of, where I'd done a lot of stuff on my own before. But that particular thing really showed me, wow, this works. And there's some real magic here to sort of be tapped into. It doesn't have to be a complicated ritual. We just literally used the Ogham trees. I mean, it was just so powerful. And to this day, I think about that ritual. We've done several sort of in the similar vein since, different kinds of healings and blessings at that gathering. We've done it on small scales with our grove, on larger scales. But I think there is such a power when you just set a sacred intention and you do something simple to raise energy, and you just bless the land, and the land was just so nourished. It was just incredible.
And thankful, probably, of being,
of course, yeah,
in that relationship thing. That's beautiful. Wow, thank you for that. On the other end of the scale, you use a word that I don't think I've ever heard it used in the terms that the way you use it in earth healing and land healing. And that is palliative care. And it hadn't really occurred to me that there are areas of land that are essentially going through the way people go through palliative care to ease their passing. I mean, that hadn't really, I just thought, wow, there are places like that. There absolutely
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
And so can you talk just a little bit about that? Then I'll bring it up again, I think, afterwards. But
Yeah. Okay. So the basic framework when we're thinking about energy work, right? The idea. So what I just described was a really high energy ceremony, right? For hemlocks that were fighting against this adelgid, right? So in this case, these trees want to live. We gave them some positive energy. We'll see if that helps their fight. In the case of the mountain that's currently the mountain near my house, or in the case of a forest that's being cut down permanently, what we're seeing is sort of a great deal of life that's being lost and is not in any way going to be replaced anytime soon. So, any of the animals and the insects that can get out of a space like that can. But, and this is really because like throughout our lands, we're seeing this, like this is the reality that we're facing right now. There's a lot of people on the land and they're taking too much, right? And they're taking land and they're doing things in ways that are not reverent. My local corporation that's logging the mountain and then, taking the top off the mountain is not thinking about the spirit of the mountain or the spirit of the trees. So a lot of people get into a situation where they're like, wow, what am I going to do for a place that is being actively damaged or destroyed? And I don't want to go raise a bunch of energy for that mountain. I don't want to wake the spirits of that mountain up because they're just suffering. Now, at some point, that suffering is going to end and healing will be able to happen again. But right now, that's not the case. Or, the streams, I'm using a lot of examples from where I live, the streams where there is no life. That is sort of an area where there's active suffering. So I think about it, and I talk about it in the book, is the difference between like your friend who's really sick and who's, in the hospital and you don't know if they're going to get better. You don't want to come in with a band and a bunch of like people and cheering and shouting, right? You want to let them rest. Maybe you bring them a cup of tea. Maybe you hold their hand. Maybe you just sit quietly. And that is the kind of work, and you're just there holding space for them. As opposed to your friend who went through major surgeries, healing better, feeling better. You're bringing your board games over, a couple of friends cheering them up, raising good energy, right? So if we think about this in terms of the kinds of, just the kinds of humans and how we know different people, deal with disease or suffering, I actually think there's a lot of parallels there. So one of the things I worry about is that like I'm going to go out and do a bunch of land healing and they're going to raise a bunch of energy for a forest that's just been cut down and and a Walmart's going to go there. Maybe that's not the best approach. And in some ways, I could actually do more harm than good because I'm sort of raising the energetic vibration. Okay, well, that's not what I want to do. So there's a lot of techniques in the book that really talk about, well, we need to first understand, deep listening, observation, really just holding space and saying, well, what is it that I need to do? What is it that the land needs from me in this environment? Because context really matters. And each situation is unique. So we're going out into these different land healing situations, or, even as simple as the trees on my street are being cut down. What should I do? Well, I'm probably going to help those trees lower their energetic frequency and sort of be at peace. I'm going to explain to them what's going on. I'm going to say, I'm sorry. I'm going to witness what's happening. And then I'm just going to hold space for them. And then after it happens, I'll do some ceremonies, sort of help those spirits pass and move on. Right. So I hate to have to write that kind of thing in a book, but that's the reality that we face, is that we are seeing these sort of larger scale destructive forces by humans. And so I think we have to be really careful about how we engage with those kinds of things.
And the land remains, the land still needs healing, even once the beings may have gone.
Exactly.
One thing I remember back in the 90s with the road protest movements we had here at Twyford Down and Newbury and things like that, of people actively out protesting. And I know a number of those people, and quite a few of them their mental health was really affected by that time, and seeing the fact that, they slowed down the road building, but the roads were still built, and the trees still came down. And the final chapter in your book is all about self-care, is about, go and be a land healer, but also, look after yourself. So what do you think people need to be aware of when it comes to that kind of thing?
Yeah, I'll start by saying that, being willing to witness what I just described, right? Even just witnessing the trees coming down on your street, there is so much violence that's being enacted against nature now by humans. And if you're going to be the person that stands there, you think about the toughest piece of people are probably in healthcare. They're the frontline, like nurses and doctors. We think about healing. Healing is not all love and light, honestly. Like it can be. It's awesome when that's what we're doing. It's awesome when I'm saying, hey, lawn, I'm going to replant you as a garden. But I really find that a lot of the places that I'm called to heal are these places that are really suffering. And that's why I was talking about protection earlier. How do we protect ourselves? But also, like, how do we heal the healers? And you think about like the idea of Chiron, right? The wounded healer. And really thinking about how do we engage in that reciprocation? How do we heal nature and also let nature heal us? I think it's critical because otherwise you burn out. You have to find ways of nourishing yourself. And if you're going to do this work, you have to find ways like I have forests that I go here that are like old growth forests that are just the most healing and nurturing places. And I go there. I don't go there to work as a land healer. I go there to rest, and I go there to just be with the spirits of nature and hang out with my friends, my old growth hemlock friends, and spend time. And so I do think that's an important part, because otherwise, if we don't know how to rejuvenate and nourish ourselves through nature, with herbs, I talked about retreats and these other things, like this is deep work, and it takes a lot. It can take a lot out of us. And so we have to always think about how do we refill our cups. And to me, that's critical. And that's also critical because in this world, we're not taught to do that. That's another part of spiritual practice, is saying, I'm allowing myself to rest. I'm allowing myself to heal. I'm going to allow myself to have a period of fallow time, that I myself follow the wheel of the year. I myself need a winter solstice and an Imbolc before spring comes again.
Absolutely.
And really thinking about that. And to me, it's like, if you can't do that for yourself, you have no business picking up the practice of land healing until you can.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you'll just burn yourself out and you'll be unhappy. And that's not, to me, it's like, I am committed to my land. I am in service to my land here, and I want to be in service to my land for the rest of my life. So how do I make sure that I am in good shape to do that? And how do I know when to step away and say, okay, I've done a lot of healing. I need to now take 6 months for myself, and I'm coming back. The other piece of this is that a lot of these issues we're talking about with land healing are long-term issues. I mean, the trees being cut down on your street, maybe not so much, but the mountaintop removal, that's an issue that's going to go on for 10 or 15 years. So I don't have to do it today if I'm not feeling up to it. But I could do it in 2 months, So when we think about land healing, a lot of it is this long term. It's sort of we follow the cycles of the land. So it is important for us to take healing. Like a lot of my healing work, almost all my land healing happens in the light half of the year. And I do a lot of land healing in the light half of the year. And then in the dark half of the year, I sort of rest and reflect and work on my own practices, and then come back. And sort of follow my own wheel of the seasons, which I find is really helpful for me and gives me sort of the capacity to sustain long term.
Well, thank you, Donna. I mean, it's been an inspiring chat. I hope listeners are feeling the same way as me. Is there anything else that you want to add before we say goodbye for however long it is until we chat again?
Yeah, I would just say go with love to your land. Come with love and care in your heart. Give that love to your land. And I think if you do that, that is just the first step. And just recognizing that all land is sacred, and that we are here as guardians, as caretakers. And I think if we sort of orient ourselves in that way, then life has a lot of meaning. It helps us understand, why are we here? It's not all pointless, that there's something really magical and rich. And the other thing I'd say, is that for those of you who are thinking about picking up land healing, this is an incredible way to deepen your relationship with the living earth. So now you're engaged in this really deep reciprocation. It's going well beyond, just, I'm going to leave an offering and gratitude. Now you are the offering, right? You are, and And when you do that, every time you pick up this work, it gives you a chance to deepen your relationship. And suddenly now your land is your best friend, and they know about you and you know about them, and the spirits are there for you and you're there for them. And it just becomes this really beautiful reciprocal thing, which you can really, really understand and deepen. So that's the other piece I would say that I think is really wonderful, is like, how do I build a deep connection with nature? Find ways to find ways to give back to nature as much as you take. That's the core. So thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
No, it's fantastic. The book Land Healing, Donna O'Driscoll, is it out now? Is it available now? It's out now.
It's out now in the US as of March 28th, and internationally in the UK and everywhere else it'll be out on May 28th.
May 28th. Okay, so we've got a little bit of a wait here, but hopefully we'll have loads of people pre-ordering it from places. Thank you for sharing your time with me so early in the morning, or it is early in the morning as far as I'm concerned. But you've been up for 4 hours. Amazing.
Thank you so much.
I will see you along the road. Thank you very much, Donna. Thank you.
Flowers on the side of the road guide me to the places I should go, where I might find healing for my soul. Places that I may have never known. Flowers on the side of the road. Flowers on the side of the road. Flowers on the road make me smile, make me stop and rest a little while. Forget about my worries and my trials as I walk across these many miles. Flowers on the road make me smile. Flowers on the road make me smile. I am just a traveler on the way, hoping I might find a better day. Flowers on the side of the road teach me things I really ought to know. Doesn't really matter where you grow, as long as you still let your color show. Flowers on the side of the road. Flowers on the side of the road. I am just a traveler for the day, hoping I might find a better way. Flowers on the side of the road guide me to the places I call home. Flowers on the road call me home. Flowers on the road call me home.
What a fabulous track. That was Flowers on the Road by Joel Brogan. Thank you so much for sending that song in, Joel. And don't forget, you can find links to all of the artists featured on DruidCast in the show notes. But this music means, my friends, that we are approaching the end of the show. But before I go, let's have the results of last month's competition. The prize was a copy of Valkyrie's Selectors of Heroes, Their Roles Within Viking and Anglo-Saxon Heathen Beliefs by Pete Jennings, and the question I asked was, what is the most commonly known name of Odin's Hall? Well, the answer is of course Valhalla, and the first name drawn from the hat and winner of that fabulous book is Hex Nottingham from Norfolk, USA. Congratulations, Hex. That book will be on its way to you very soon. The prize this month is a copy of Donna's new book, Healing Physical, Metaphysical and Ritual Approaches to Healing the Earth. And the question I'd like you to answer is, Donna is the current Grand Archdruid of an American Druid order. What is the name of that Druid order? Donna O'Driscoll is the current Grand Archdruid of an American Druid order. What is the name of that Druid order? Email your answer along with your full postal address to podcast@druidry.org, and one of you will win a copy of Donna's book. And please remember that we do not use your information for any other purpose. As soon as that prize is sent, your details are always deleted. Well, my friends, that is a show. Have a wonderful Beltane if you are here in the Northern Hemisphere, and a blessed Samhain to all of our listeners in the Southern. I'll see you next month for DruidCast episode 203, but until then, I wish you all peace and blessed be. Goodbye.